Hey everybody, today I have kind of a fun experiment, and I love doing these experiments where I put wafer paper in the rain or I put it in the fridge and then I take it out and see what happens. Today I have rice paper sales and wafer paper sales. Rice paper and wafer paper are not the same thing, and I will link the video about that in the description, but I have rice paper sales and wafer paper sales. I stuck them on a cake. I'll show you. Possibly the weirdest looking cake you've ever seen. Okay, this is purely for demonstration purposes. This is not meant to be pretty. But this side has wafer paper sales on it. This side has rice paper sales. And you can see the rice paper looks very translucent. The wafer paper doesn't. Some of it is printed, but even the white wafer paper, you can't see through it. That's the difference. Rice paper, you can see through. So you can get that nice kind of ethereal look. But I put this cake in the fridge yesterday afternoon, probably around 3 o'clock. And if I was decorating a wedding cake, that's about the right timeline. I'd be putting cakes, in the fridge over the course of the day as I finish them. Then I'd be taking them out around this time to deliver them to the wedding receptions. So I'm going to leave this sitting on the counter, and I'm just going to see what happens to it over the course of about an hour. When you put wafer paper in the fridge, it's not the refrigerator that's going to cause the most problems. It's when you take it out of the fridge and the cake starts warming up and forms condensation on it. And that moisture can soak into the wafer paper and soften it up. I don't know what it's going to do to the rice paper. This is pretty hard. So I'm just going to leave this on the counter for an hour. I'm going to see what happens to it. I'll come back in an hour and we'll continue this, and we'll see if there was any effect to the rice paper or the wafer paper sales. I think with the sales, they really are kind of stiffer. They're tougher than just a regular sheet of wafer paper or rice paper. So they might hold up to the moisture better. On top of that, it's a really rainy day today. So after I'm done having this on the counter, I'm going to stick it outside, just see what happens in the humidity, and that will kind of replicate putting it outside during a wedding reception, because I don't know, what the weather is like in other places, but a lot of brides have outdoor receptions in the spring and the summer and the fall, and sometimes it rains. And I have delivered plenty of wedding cakes where the weather conditions were not optimal, but it was under a tent. And that's what everybody says, but it's under a tent. And I was like, yeah, but there's still a lot of humidity in the air. And humidity is what could cause damage to these. So we're going to see what happens with that. But first I'm going to leave this on the counter for about an hour, and then I'm going to come back and see how it fared. Okay, after an hour out of the refrigerator, there's nothing wrong with these sales at all. So these are holding their shape. They're not sagging. They're not wilting. There's nothing wrong with them. The cake is warming up and it's forming a little condensation, but it's not enough to affect the sales. And when you make the wafer paper sales or the rice paper sales, it does stiffen the starch, like I mentioned before. So they're really holding up well. And now we're going to do the real test. I'm going to put them outside on a little table in a covered area, but in very high humidity in rainy weather. So I'm going to leave it out there and we'll see how long it takes for anything to happen to it. And we'll see if they stand up in that kind of weather, because that would be great. Okay, so this cake has been sitting outside for 3 hours, and that's probably just a little bit shorter than the time it would sit outside if it was at an outdoor reception, if you deliver like 1 hour before the reception starts. So, and this was the worst case scenario. It's very humid out there. It's not hot, but it's humid. So I'm interested in what happened with this. Now, these are kind of saggy. You see, this one used to be a bulb, and now it's just kind of fallen over. But other than that, they're actually in pretty good shape. See this one on the side? It's not sagging. It hasn't absorbed that much moisture, and I promise you that that would be the one thing that would make this stuff, be ruined. Now the wafer paper, on the other hand, it actually not on the other hand. The wafer paper actually held up pretty well. It's soft, but it's not falling over. So I think if you're someplace that's super, super humid like Florida or Texas or someplace that's near the water, this might not be the best option to be outside in heat or humidity. It's the humidity really, it's not the heat. But I think that you can probably do this on an outdoor cake or just an indoor cake, it doesn't matter. If you have it in the fridge and then you take it out, these are holding up pretty well. I don't see any reason why this would be a bad option for an outdoor wedding if the weather conditions are good. The one thing I would be careful of is putting this in a commercial fridge, like if you're at a restaurant or if you're at a venue that has a walk-in fridge, because those refrigerators tend to be very humid. And even though this held up pretty well, I would be careful with that. So as long as you're delivering a reasonable amount of time beforehand and the cake isn't sitting out in the humidity for a super long time, I think this is fine. This is the only one that really kind of melted, and it's the one that was round to begin with. So you might lose the shape of some of them, but the ones that are stuck to the sides are holding up very, very well. All right, so post any questions that you have, give this video a thumbs up, and go over and read the blog article if you want to see the whole thing in text and not just a video. I'll talk to you later.